The Valkyrian Dominion had been watching Earth for 100 years. Their scouts arrived in the early 21st century, when humans were still fighting wars over oil and borders. Supreme Commander Zelthar reviewed the reports with cold satisfaction. The blue planet was rich with resources and the inhabitants were primitive. They had barely touched their own moon and their weapons were laughably simple. Nuclear bombs and conventional missiles were nothing compared to plasma cannons and gravitational disruptors. The Dominion had conquered 17 star systems using the same method. Send scouts to watch and learn, build a massive fleet, arrive with overwhelming force, strip the planet clean and move to the next target. Earth would be no different. Zelthar stood in the command center of his flagship. The vessel was 2 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to glass an entire continent. Around him floated 300 similar warships. Each one had been built specifically for this invasion. The Valkyrian engineers had studied human defenses for decades. They knew about radar systems and satellite networks. They knew about fighter jets and aircraft carriers. They knew about every military base and every weapon humanity possessed. The invasion plan was perfect. Strike from orbit. Destroy military installations first. Give the humans one chance to surrender. If they refused, then bombardment would begin. Cities would burn. Governments would collapse. Within a week, the planet would belong to the Dominion. On Earth, nobody knew what was coming. Defense Secretary Helen Morrison sat in her office at the Pentagon reviewing routine reports. Budget allocations for the new space program. Maintenance schedules for the orbital defense platforms. Supply chains for the expanded fleet. The United States had been investing heavily in space technology for the past decade. Other nations had followed suit. China launched their deep space station. Russia built 3 new combat spacecraft. The European Union pooled resources for a joint defense initiative. It all seemed like preparation for a distant future threat. Nobody expected that threat to arrive on a Tuesday morning in October. Lieutenant Sophie Blake was 28 years old and had been working at the Deep Space Monitoring Station in Colorado for 3 years. Her job was simple but boring. Watch the screens. Record any unusual readings. File reports that nobody ever seemed to read. Most days nothing happened. Occasionally a meteor shower would light up the sensors. Sometimes a solar flare would cause interesting patterns. That morning started like any other. Sophie arrived at 6 with her coffee and settled into her chair. The monitors showed the usual data. Then at 6:15 everything changed. The sensors detected something at the edge of the solar system. The readings were massive. Sophie thought the equipment was malfunctioning. She ran diagnostics, but everything checked out. Whatever was out there was real and it was huge. The energy signatures were unlike anything in the database. They were moving fast. Too fast for natural objects. Sophie felt her hands shaking as she reached for the emergency phone. The call went directly to Washington. Within minutes, alarms were sounding in every military command center on the planet. Admiral Craig Patterson had been in the Navy for 32 years. He commanded the Earth Defense Initiative, which was supposed to be a precaution against hypothetical threats. Suddenly, the hypothetical was real. He sat in the Situation Room surrounded by screens showing data from Sophie's station. 300 objects, each one massive, traveling in formation, approaching from beyond Mars. The math was simple and terrifying. They would reach Earth orbit in less than 48 hours. President Amanda Cole called an emergency meeting of the National Security Council. The room was filled with generals and admirals and intelligence directors. Everyone was asking the same questions. Who were they? What did they want? How should Earth respond? Nobody had answers. The only thing they knew for certain was that this was first contact and it was not going to be peaceful. The objects were warships. The formation was military. Someone out there had decided that Earth was a target. Captain Ryan Foster commanded the USS Defiant. The ship was brand new, 5 years in development and only 6 months in active service. It was designed for deep space combat using theoretical weapons against theoretical enemies. Now those enemies were real. Ryan gathered his crew of 80 personnel and gave them the news. They were going to war. Nobody spoke. Nobody complained. They all knew this might be their last mission. The Defiant launched from the orbital dock along with 16 other spacecraft. It was the entire combat-ready fleet. 17 ships against 300. The odds were not good. Back at the monitoring station, Sophie continued tracking the alien fleet. She analyzed every piece of data looking for weaknesses. The ships used fusion reactors. Their engines created specific radiation patterns. Their hulls were made from unknown metals, but they reflected certain wavelengths. She sent everything to military research facilities around the world. Scientists worked around the clock studying the information. If there was going to be a fight, then Earth needed every advantage. Dr. Nathan Pierce sat in his lab at MIT staring at the data. He had spent 20 years studying theoretical physics, and now he was looking at technology that should not exist. The alien ships used faster-than-light travel. They had energy shields. They carried weapons that could probably destroy cities with single shots. But something about the shield frequencies caught his attention. They were tuned to deflect energy weapons like lasers and plasma. That made sense for fighting other advanced civilizations. But what if Earth used something different? Something primitive. Something the aliens would not expect. Nathan picked up his phone and called the Pentagon. He needed to speak with someone who could authorize weapon deployment. The idea was crazy, but it might work. Humanity had been throwing rocks at each other since the Stone Age. Maybe it was time to throw rocks at the aliens. Very fast rocks. Rocks moving at incredible speeds. Kinetic weapons. Simple physics. Mass times velocity equals a very bad day for anyone on the receiving end. Helen Morrison listened to Nathan's proposal. It was insane. It was desperate. It was possibly the only chance Earth had. She authorized immediate deployment of every kinetic weapon in the arsenal. Railguns, coil guns, mass drivers. Even nuclear missiles were retrofitted to carry solid projectiles instead of warheads. If the aliens were expecting energy weapons, they were going to get a surprise. The Valkyrian fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel just beyond Mars' orbit. The transition created a ripple in space that every sensor on Earth detected simultaneously. Sophie Blake watched her screens light up with warnings. The alien ships had arrived 6 hours ahead of schedule. She immediately sent updates to the Pentagon. Time had just run out. Selther looked at the blue planet displayed on his command screen. It was smaller than he expected. More water than land. Primitive cities scattered across the continents. He could see the lights of human civilization glowing in the darkness. Soon those lights would go dark forever. He signaled his communications officer. It was time to deliver the ultimatum. The message broadcast across every frequency humans used. Radio, television, internet, military channels, civilian channels, everything. The Valkyrian language was harsh and guttural, but the translation software worked perfectly. The meaning was clear. Surrender or die. Zelthar gave Earth 12 hours to respond. After that, the bombardment would begin. He expected the humans to collapse immediately. Every other species had. Fear was a universal constant. President Cole stood in the White House Situation Room surrounded by advisors. Some argued for negotiation. Some argued for immediate surrender. A few argued for fighting. The president listened to all of them, then made her decision. She would address the world. The speech was broadcast from every platform. Satellite, cable, streaming services. Her words were translated into 200 languages. The message was simple. Earth would not surrender. Humanity had survived ice ages and plagues and world wars. They would survive this too. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Around the world, military forces mobilized. Soldiers reported to bases. Pilots climbed into cockpits. Sailors manned their stations. The civilian population was told to seek shelter. Cities activated their emergency protocols. Millions of people moved into subway tunnels and underground bunkers. Some people prayed. Some people cried. Most people simply waited to see what would happen next. Admiral Patterson coordinated the defense from his command center deep beneath the Pentagon. Every military asset on Earth was now under his direct control. The 17 spacecraft, including Ryan's Defiant, were moving into position. Orbital defense platforms powered up their weapons. Ground-based installations prepared to fire. Submarine fleets received their orders. The entire planet was holding its breath. Sophie continued monitoring the alien fleet. They were moving slowly now, taking up positions around Earth. The formation was methodical and precise. 3 groups of 100 ships each, 1 over the Americas, 1 over Europe and Africa, 1 over Asia. They were preparing for simultaneous strikes. She shared the tactical analysis with military planners. The aliens were following a textbook invasion strategy. That meant they were predictable. Dr. Nathan Pierce was at a military testing facility in Nevada. Engineers were making final adjustments to the kinetic weapon systems. The railguns had been upgraded with experimental power supplies. They could now accelerate projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed. The tungsten rods were each 1 meter long and 20 centimeters wide. Simple metal. Nothing fancy. But when they hit something at those velocities, the results would be devastating. Captain Foster brought the Defiant around the dark side of the moon. His orders were to stay hidden until the shooting started. The other 16 Earth ships were scattered in similar positions. They were outnumbered, but they had surprise on their side. The aliens did not know about Earth's spacecraft. The vessels were small and stealthy. They had been built in secret over the past 5 years. Now they would get their first real combat test. Zelthar waited for the human response. The 12 hours passed slowly. He expected a surrender message. Instead, he received silence. The humans were either brave or stupid. Probably stupid. He gave the order to begin orbital bombardment. His weapons officers targeted major military installations. The plan was to cripple Earth's defenses first, then the cities, then complete subjugation. Helen Morrison was in the Situation Room with President Cole and Admiral Patterson. They watched the alien ships power up their weapons. Energy readings spiked across the board. This was it, the moment of truth. Helen gave the order she had been dreading. All forces were authorized to engage. Protocol 7 was now active. Earth was at war. The first Valkyrian plasma cannon fired at a military base in Colorado. The beam of superheated matter streaked through the atmosphere. It should have obliterated the target. Instead, it hit an energy shield that had been secretly installed around every major installation. The plasma dispersed harmlessly. Zelthar stared at his display in confusion. The humans had shield technology. The intelligence reports never mentioned shields. Admiral Patterson smiled grimly. The shields would not last long, but they did not need to. They just needed to buy time. He gave his next order. Every kinetic weapon on Earth fired simultaneously. Railguns, mass drivers, coil guns, even conventional artillery with specially designed shells. Thousands of projectiles launched into space. Most were aimed at the alien ships. Some were aimed at nothing. Those were decoys meant to confuse targeting systems. The Valkyrian point defense systems activated automatically. Lasers swept through space, destroying incoming projectiles. But there were too many. The aliens had prepared for energy weapons and missiles. They had not prepared for simple metal moving at extreme velocities. The first tungsten rod punched through the shields of a Valkyrian destroyer, like they were not even there. It hit the hull and kept going. The kinetic energy was so massive that it vaporized everything in its path. The destroyer broke apart in a silent explosion. Zelthar watched in horror as 3 more ships died in the span of seconds. His tactical display was filled with incoming threats, solid projectiles, no energy signatures, no guidance systems, just metal flying through space. His shields could not stop them. His point defense could not track them all. He ordered evasive maneuvers, but the human weapons were already on target. Sophie monitored the battle from her station. The alien fleet was in chaos. Ships were breaking formation. Some were trying to return fire. Others were attempting to retreat. But Earth's orbital platforms had them boxed in. Laser batteries carved through alien hulls. Missile swarms overwhelmed their defenses. The Valkyrians had superior technology, but they were fighting on Earth's terms now. Captain Foster brought the Defiant out of hiding. His railguns opened fire at maximum velocity. Each shot was calculated for precision. He targeted command bridges and engine sections. 1 shot per target. Make every round count. His crew worked with practiced efficiency. Load, aim, fire, reload. The pattern repeated over and over. The space around Earth had become a battlefield unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Zelthar tried to understand what was happening. His fleet was dying. Ships that had taken years to build were being destroyed in seconds. The humans were using primitive weapons, simple kinetic projectiles. It made no sense. His shields were designed to stop the most advanced energy weapons in the galaxy. They were useless against chunks of metal moving at ridiculous speeds. Admiral Patterson watched the tactical display with fierce concentration. The alien fleet was breaking apart. 2 minutes into the fight, and Earth forces had destroyed 47 enemy ships. The kinetic weapons were working better than anyone had hoped. But the battle was far from over. The Valkyrians still had overwhelming numbers. They just needed time to adapt. Time was something Patterson would not give them. He ordered the second wave attack. Every submarine in Earth's oceans launched their payloads. Missiles broke the surface and climbed into the sky. But these were not ordinary missiles. They carried electromagnetic pulse warheads. When they reached the edge of space, they detonated. The electromagnetic pulses washed over the alien fleet like invisible waves. Valkyrian electronic systems went dark. Ships lost power. Weapons stopped firing. Shields collapsed. Sophie tracked the results from her monitoring station. The EMP attack had worked perfectly. Nearly 1/3 of the alien fleet was disabled, dead in space. Drifting helplessly, she forwarded targeting data to every weapons platform in range. The disabled ships were easy prey. Railguns and lasers made quick work of them. Explosions blossomed silently in the vacuum. Zelthar realized his mistake too late. He had underestimated these humans. They fought dirty. They used weapons that civilized species had abandoned centuries ago. Kinetic weapons were crude and wasteful. EMPs were considered barbaric. But they were effective. His fleet was being slaughtered. In 3 minutes he had lost over 100 ships. The Supreme Commander made a decision he never thought he would need to make. He ordered a full retreat. Captain Foster saw the alien ships beginning to turn. They were running. Good. Let them run into the trap. Earth's spacecraft had been positioned for exactly this moment. The Defiant and its sister ships accelerated hard. They cut off the escape routes. Railguns fired continuously. The tungsten rods tore through alien hulls. Foster targeted engines and reactors. Crippled ships could not run. Crippled ships could not fight back. Dr. Nathan Pierce monitored the battle from his lab. His theory had been correct. The aliens were not prepared for kinetic warfare. Their entire military doctrine was based on energy weapons and shield technology. They had forgotten the simple truth that humans understood instinctively. If you hit something hard enough, it breaks. Mass times velocity. Basic physics. The universe did not care about advanced technology. Helen Morrison allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. The plan was working. But she knew better than to celebrate early. The aliens still had nearly 200 ships. They were disorganized and panicking, but they were not defeated. She contacted Admiral Patterson. It was time for the third wave. The final push. Ground-based lasers had been charging during the first minutes of the fight. Massive installations that drew power from entire cities. They required precise targeting and clear atmospheric conditions. But when they fired, the results were spectacular. Beams of coherent light punched through the darkness. They struck alien ships with pinpoint accuracy. Hulls melted. Reactors exploded. The lasers were not as powerful as the kinetic weapons, but they were faster. They could engage multiple targets in seconds. Zelthar tried to organize a defensive formation. His remaining ships clustered together. Combined shields. Coordinated point defense. It was the correct tactical response. It was also predictable. The humans had anticipated this move. Missile swarms appeared from multiple directions. Hundreds of conventional warheads. The aliens focused on defending against the missiles. They never saw the real threat until it was too late. Hidden among the conventional missiles were special weapons. Humans called them bunker busters, missiles designed to penetrate deep before detonating. They slipped through the alien defensive fire. They hit shields and kept going. The shields were designed to stop energy. These missiles were solid matter with engines attached. They punched through and buried themselves in alien hulls. Then they exploded. The clustered formation became a death trap. Ships were packed too close together. When one exploded, the debris hit neighboring vessels. Chain reactions rippled through the formation. More ships died from friendly fire than from human weapons. Zelthar watched his fleet disintegrate. 5 minutes had passed since the battle started. He had lost 200 ships. His invasion force was gone. President Cole stood in the Situation Room watching history being made. Earth was winning. Against all odds, humanity was defeating an alien invasion. But she felt no joy. Only grim determination. This victory would come at a price. She could see the damage reports coming in. 3 orbital platforms destroyed. 12 spacecraft lost. Thousands of casualties. The aliens had gotten some shots through the defenses. Sophie noticed something on her monitors. The remaining alien ships were scattering. They were no longer retreating in formation. Each ship was running independently, making random jumps to faster than light speed. They were panicking. She tracked them as long as possible. Most would escape, but they would carry warnings back to wherever they came from. Earth had just announced itself to the galaxy. Captain Foster brought the Defiant alongside a crippled Valkyrian cruiser. His orders were to capture it if possible. Boarding teams prepared to transfer, but the alien crew had other ideas. The cruiser's reactor went critical. Foster barely had time to order emergency acceleration. The Defiant escaped the blast radius with seconds to spare. The aliens preferred death to capture. That told him something important about their culture. Admiral Patterson checked his chronometer. 6 minutes. The entire battle had lasted 6 minutes. In that time, Earth forces had destroyed or disabled 283 alien ships. 17 had escaped. The rest were debris. It was the most one-sided defeat in military history. The Valkyrians had spent a century preparing. Earth had wiped them out in 6 minutes. Dr. Nathan Pierce received reports from recovery teams. They had managed to secure several intact alien ships. The crews were dead, but the technology was salvageable. Faster than light drives, energy weapons, shield generators, advanced computers. It was a treasure trove of information. Earth would learn from this. They would adapt alien technology to human needs. The next time someone tried to invade, they would get an even bigger surprise. Helen Morrison drafted her after-action report. The victory was complete, but it raised more questions than it answered. Where did the Valkyrians come from? Were there other species out there? Would someone else try to conquer Earth? The galaxy suddenly seemed much more dangerous, but it also seemed full of possibilities. Humanity had proven they could defend themselves. Now they needed to decide what came next. The debris field around Earth stretched for thousands of kilometers. Wreckage from 300 alien warships mixed with the remains of human spacecraft and defense platforms. Recovery teams worked carefully through the floating graveyard. Every piece of alien technology was valuable. Every intact system was a window into a larger universe that humanity had just discovered. President Cole addressed the United Nations 3 days after the battle. The chamber was packed. Every nation on Earth wanted to hear what came next. She spoke plainly. The victory had been total, but the cost was real. 4,000 military personnel had died. 2 cities had taken direct hits from alien weapons before the shields held. Another 8,000 civilians were casualties. It could have been worse. Much worse. But every death was a tragedy that would not be forgotten. Admiral Patterson stood before a joint session of Congress. Senators and representatives wanted answers. How had Earth won? What was the alien plan? Would there be more attacks? Patterson explained the tactical situation. The Valkyrians had prepared for the wrong kind of war. They expected energy weapons and conventional military tactics. Earth had given them kinetic chaos and electromagnetic nightmares. But the victory was not due to superior technology. It was due to human adaptability, the willingness to use any weapon that worked, the refusal to fight by someone else's rules. Sophie Blake received a promotion to major and was transferred to a new division. The Xenotechnology Research Center. Her job was to analyze alien systems and figure out how they worked. She stood in a massive hangar staring at an intact Valkyrian destroyer. The ship was enormous up close. Dark metal hull covered in strange symbols. She and her team had 6 months to unlock its secrets. 6 months to understand technology that was centuries ahead of Earth science. Captain Foster was recovering in a military hospital. The Defiant had taken damage during the final minutes of the battle. An alien plasma bolt had clipped the port side. 3 crew members died. Foster himself had suffered severe burns. But he was alive. His ship was being repaired. In 2 months he would return to duty. The Navy had big plans for him. Plans that involved exploring beyond the solar system. Dr. Nathan Pierce could not sleep. His lab was filled with alien equipment. Power cores that generated impossible amounts of energy. Computers that used quantum processing. Weapons that manipulated gravity itself. He felt like a caveman examining a smartphone. The basic principles were understandable, but the implementation was far beyond current human capability. Still, he and his team would learn. Humans were good at reverse engineering. Give them something to take apart and they would figure it out eventually. Helen Morrison was in meetings 18 hours a day. Every government on Earth wanted to be involved in the alien technology research. Every military wanted access to the new weapons. Every corporation saw dollar signs. She had to coordinate international cooperation while preventing conflicts. The world had united to fight the invasion. Keeping them united during peacetime would be harder. But it was necessary. Earth needed to speak with one voice to the galaxy. The biggest discovery came from the Valkyrian flagship. Recovery teams found the main computer core mostly intact. It took 3 weeks to crack the encryption. When they finally accessed the files, everyone realized how much danger Earth had been in. The database contained detailed information about the Dominion, a massive empire spanning 40 star systems. The Valkyrians were just one species among many. They served something called the Hegemony Council, a group of ancient races that controlled large sections of the galaxy. Sophie studied the star charts with growing concern. The Valkyrian Dominion was just a minor power. There were civilizations out there that made them look primitive. The Hegemony had millions of ships, billions of soldiers, resources beyond imagination, and Earth had just destroyed a Valkyrian fleet. That would not go unnoticed. Someone would come to investigate. Someone would want revenge. Earth had bought time with their victory, but the war was far from over. President Cole called another emergency meeting. This time it included leaders from every major nation. She shared the information from the alien database. The reactions varied. Some leaders wanted to hide, pull back, pretend Earth was not worth bothering with. Others wanted to prepare for the next fight. Build more ships. Develop better weapons. A few suggested trying to make contact. Reach out to the other species. Try diplomacy before more violence. Cole listened to everyone, then made her decision. Earth would do all three. Admiral Patterson was put in charge of the military buildup. His goal was simple: make Earth impossible to conquer. The orbital defense network was expanded. More platforms, more weapons, better sensors. The spacecraft fleet would grow from 17 to 100 within 2 years. But numbers were not enough. The ships needed to be better, faster, more lethal. He authorized crash programs to integrate alien technology into human designs. Dr. Nathan Pierce and his team made breakthrough after breakthrough. The Valkyrian faster-than-light drive used something called spatial compression. It created a bubble around the ship that moved through space without actually traveling through it. The math was insanely complex, but it worked. Human engineers began designing Earth's first FTL-capable vessels. Within a year, the prototype would be ready. Within 5 years, every ship would have the capability. Sophie discovered something interesting in the alien cultural database. The Valkyrians were not conquerors by nature. They had been peaceful traders once. Then the hegemony came. The council offered a choice. Join us or be destroyed. The Valkyrians joined. They became enforcers, doing the dirty work of conquest so the ancient races could keep their hands clean. It was a familiar story. Bullies forcing others to become bullies. The cycle of violence spreading across the stars. Captain Foster was released from the hospital after 6 weeks. His burns had healed thanks to advanced medical technology. Some of it was human. Some was adapted from alien techniques found in the database. He returned to the Defiant for its relaunch ceremony. The ship had been completely rebuilt. New armor, new weapons, new engines based on Valkyrian designs. It was twice as fast and 3 times as deadly. Foster felt proud. His ship had fought in humanity's first space battle. Now it would lead humanity's expansion into the galaxy. Helen Morrison drafted the document that would change everything. The Earth Defense Charter, a treaty that united every nation under a single military command structure. No more separate armies. No more conflicting strategies. Earth would have one military, one fleet, one voice. Getting every country to agree was like herding cats. But the alien threat made it possible. Fear was a powerful motivator. After 6 months of negotiations, the charter was signed. Admiral Patterson became the first Supreme Commander of United Earth Forces. President Cole made a decision that surprised everyone. She announced she would not seek re-election. Instead, she would lead the new diplomatic corps. Earth needed someone to make contact with alien species. Someone to negotiate treaties. Someone to represent humanity's interests in a galaxy full of unknowns. She was the obvious choice. The woman who refused to surrender. The leader who united Earth. Other species would respect that, or at least they would not dismiss humanity as primitive. The memorial was built in Geneva, a massive structure of white stone. The names of every person who died during the invasion were carved into the walls. 4,000 military personnel, 8,000 civilians. Each name represented a life cut short, a family destroyed. But they had not died in vain. Their sacrifice had saved billions, had given humanity a future among the stars. People came from around the world to pay respects, to remember, to promise that Earth would never be caught unprepared again. 2 years passed since the 6-minute war. Earth looked completely different. The orbital defenses were now impenetrable. 300 defense platforms surrounded the planet in overlapping fields of fire. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a fleet. The spacecraft numbers had grown exactly as planned. 100 combat vessels patrolled the solar system. Each ship was a hybrid of human and alien technology. Fast, deadly, ready for anything. Sophie Blake stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Horizon. She was no longer a lieutenant. Admiral Patterson had promoted her to commander and given her the most important mission in human history. First contact. The Horizon was equipped with diplomatic facilities and enough weapons to fight its way out of trouble. Sophie's orders were clear. Find other species. Make friends if possible. Gather intelligence regardless. Earth needed allies or at least neutral parties. Standing alone against the hegemony was suicide. The Horizon's crew was carefully selected. Scientists, diplomats, soldiers, linguists, engineers. 150 people representing every nation on Earth. They trained together for 6 months, learning to work as a unit, learning alien languages from the Valkyrian database, preparing for scenarios that ranged from peaceful trade to hostile first contact. Nobody knew what they would find out there, but they would face it together. Dr. Nathan Pierce was not on the Horizon. He stayed on Earth working on the next generation of technology. His team had cracked the secrets of Valkyrian energy weapons. Now they were building human versions. Plasma cannons that could melt through any known armor. Gravity disruptors that could tear ships apart. The weapons were terrifying, but necessary. Earth would never again face an enemy with superior firepower. Never again would humanity be outgunned. Captain Foster commanded the defense fleet. His flagship was no longer the Defiant. That ship was retired to a museum, a reminder of where Earth had been. Foster now commanded the dreadnought Washington. 2 kilometers of armored fury. The ship carried enough weaponry to take on 50 Valkyrian destroyers. It was overkill by any reasonable measure. But Earth was not interested in reasonable. They were interested in survival. The Washington and its sister ships guaranteed that survival. President Cole had kept her promise. She did not run for re-election. Instead, she became Ambassador Cole, head of the diplomatic corps. Her first mission was aboard the Horizon. She would be humanity's voice to the stars. The woman who stared down an alien invasion would now try to prevent the next one. It was a daunting task. But if anyone could do it, Cole could. She had proven that humans did not break easily. Admiral Patterson ran the military from his headquarters on the orbital station Liberty. The station was a city in space, home to 50,000 personnel. It served as command center and shipyard and research facility. Everything Earth needed to defend itself was coordinated from Liberty. Patterson was 60 years old and had no plans to retire. He would serve until Earth was truly safe. That might take decades. He was fine with that. Helen Morrison remained Defense Secretary. She worked closely with Patterson coordinating military and civilian efforts. The integration of alien technology required massive resources. Entire industries were retooled. Education systems were upgraded. Millions of people trained in new fields: xenotechnology, astrogation, extraterrestrial relations. Earth was transforming from a planetary civilization to a spacefaring one. The change was happening faster than anyone thought possible. The Horizon made its first jump to faster than light speed on a cold morning in December. Sophie felt the universe twist around her. For a moment she existed everywhere and nowhere. Then reality snapped back. They had traveled 10 light years in seconds. The journey that would have taken decades with conventional drives was instantaneous. She looked at the stars through the viewport. None of them were familiar. Earth was far behind. Ahead was the unknown. Their first stop was a system the Valkyrian database called Trader's Port, a neutral meeting ground where dozens of species conducted business. It was the closest thing to a galactic crossroads. If Earth wanted to meet aliens, this was the place. The Horizon approached cautiously. Sophie had no idea what to expect. The database said the port was peaceful. But the database also said humans were primitive. Clearly the Valkyrians got some things wrong. The port was bigger than Sophie imagined. Hundreds of ships from dozens of species. Some looked like organic creatures grown instead of built. Others were geometric shapes that made no sense. A few looked vaguely similar to human designs. Function followed form across the galaxy, it seemed. The horizon transmitted greetings in 20 alien languages. The response came in flawless English. Someone had been expecting them. Ambassador Cole stood in the airlock preparing for humanity's true first contact. Not an invasion, not a battle, but a meeting of equals. The alien who came aboard was called a trader. The species specialized in commerce and information exchange. They were short, barely a meter tall, 4 arms, no visible eyes, but they were friendly. The trader spoke through a translation device. They had heard about Earth, about the Valkyrians, about the 6-minute war. The galaxy was talking about humanity. The meeting lasted 6 hours. Cole learned that Earth had made an impression, a bad one from the hegemony's perspective. The Council did not like losing assets, but they had bigger problems than one lost fleet. There were wars happening. Entire sectors in rebellion, ancient enemies awakening. The galaxy was more chaotic than the Valkyrian database suggested. Earth had picked an interesting time to announce itself. The trader offered Cole something unexpected. A deal. The traders would share information, maps, cultural databases, technology schematics. In exchange, Earth would share their story, their tactics, their methods. Knowledge was currency in the galaxy. Humanity's victory over the Valkyrians was valuable. Cole considered carefully, then accepted. Earth needed information more than it needed secrets. Sophie spent weeks at Trader's Port meeting other species. Most were friendly or at least neutral. A few were openly hostile. They saw humans as upstarts, primitives who got lucky. One species called the Vrax even challenged her to a duel. Sophie declined politely. Starting a war over hurt feelings was not in her mission parameters. But she made note of the Vrax. Any species that quick to violence was dangerous. Back on Earth, Dr. Nathan Pierce reviewed the new information from the traders. The technology was incredible. Medical advances that could eliminate disease. Energy systems that were perfectly clean. Construction techniques that could build cities in days. But what caught his attention were the weapons. The galaxy had been at war for thousands of years. The weapons reflected that. Humanity's kinetic warfare was primitive by comparison, but it was also unique. Nobody else used simple mass as a weapon anymore. Pierce wondered if that gave Earth an advantage or just delayed the inevitable. Admiral Patterson read the intelligence reports with growing concern. The Hegemony Council was vast. Millions of ships. Billions of soldiers. Resources that made Earth look insignificant. But they were stretched thin, fighting on multiple fronts, dealing with internal conflicts. Earth was safe for now because the Council had bigger problems. That would not last forever. Eventually they would come. Earth needed to be ready. More than ready. Earth needed to be strong enough that the Council would think twice. Captain Foster took the Washington on its first patrol beyond the solar system. His orders were to show the flag. Let other species see what humanity could build. The Dreadnought visited 3 systems. Each one had alien outposts or colonies. The reactions varied. Some species were impressed. Others were dismissive. The Vrax sent a war fleet to intercept 50 ships against 1. Foster did not flinch. He broadcast a simple message. Attack and we will defend ourselves. The Vrax commander made the mistake of testing that claim. The fight lasted 90 seconds. The Washington's weapon systems were experimental, based on Valkyrian technology, but enhanced with human engineering. The plasma cannons fired in perfect coordination. Gravity disruptors tore ships apart. Kinetic weapons punched through shields like paper. The Vrax fleet was destroyed before they got a shot off. Foster sent the survivors home with a message. Humanity does not start fights, but we finish them. The galaxy needed to understand that. Ambassador Cole received an invitation 3 months into her mission. The Hegemony Council wanted to meet. Officially to discuss the Valkyrian incident. Unofficially to size up the new player. Cole accepted immediately. This was the moment Earth had been preparing for. She took the Horizon to the Council's headquarters. A massive station orbiting an artificial star. The structure was beautiful and terrifying. A monument to power and age. The Council chamber held representatives from 40 ancient species, beings that had been traveling the stars when humans were still living in caves. They looked at Cole with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. She stood before them alone. No guards, no weapons. Just her and her conviction that humanity deserved a place among the stars. The Council leader spoke. An entity that looked like living crystal, The question was simple. Why should we allow humans to exist? You destroyed our property. You refused to submit. Give us one reason not to wipe you out. Cole's answer was equally simple. Because we will make you pay for every human life.